The honourable member for Provencher.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and it's always a privilege to rise in this House. And before I really dive into my speech on Bill C-34, I just want to acknowledge Marilyn Bow, the president of the Springfield Ag Society, for hosting myself and my wife at their annual banquet. You know, she's a tremendous advocate and supporter of the agriculture community in her riding of Springfield and broader. And I also want to mention Mayor Myron Dick from Niverville, Manitoba, who also hosted my wife and myself this weekend, together with his wife Sherry, at the Niverville Heritage Centre annual fundraising banquet. And that Niverville Heritage Centre does a tremendous amount of good work in the community, especially supporting our vulnerable seniors. So thank you very much, Niverville Heritage Centre. But the interesting thing, Madam Speaker, about what came up this past weekend at both of those events was the issue of carbon tax. And both of them were very, folks at both venues talked to me about the carbon tax vote that we had here earlier in this House today. And they said, how is it going to go, Mr. Falk? How is it going to go? Is this a confidence vote, and will this actually bring us into an election? Because we know that the Liberals want to quadruple the carbon tax, and we know that already Canadians right across the country are experiencing significant costs increases to the cost of living, and affordability is top of mind for almost all Canadians. And so they asked me, how is...
You got a point of order, the honourable member for Kingston and the Islands.
Madam Speaker, I'm struggling to find any kind of link between what the member's talking about and the bill that's before the House right now. We've had a number of opportunities to discuss the subject that he's trying to discuss, but right now we're talking about this bill. Perhaps you could encourage him to get back to the subject at hand.
Okay, so I just want to remind members that there is a little bit of flexibility during the speeches, of course, and I just want to remind members that are making speeches, that are getting up to speak on bills before the House, that it needs to be relative to the bill, and should mention either the bill or what's in the bill during their speech. The honourable member for Provencher.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and that's very good advice. And I was actually paving the pathway to this particular bill and how this carbon tax is negatively impacting investment in Canada. But you know what? The Liberals today had an opportunity to reduce the cost of living for Canadians from coast to coast to coast, and they failed on doing that. They were joined by the Bloc. The Bloc had an opportunity to speak up for Quebecers, to make sure that their cost of living also is being reduced. They failed to do that. And in fact, you know, the members from Winnipeg North, Winnipeg South Centre, St. Boniface, St. Vital, Liberal members that could have reduced the cost of home heating for their constituents voted against this motion to expand the carbon tax pause to all Canadians. And that's very disappointing that their constituents can't even count on them to represent them adequately here in the House. And so let me now dive really headlong into my speech and carry on with that. We've seen this government before where they subject a bill to being discussed, even this critical one here. It is something that we should have seen long ago. It requires legislation, of course, the whole issue of Invest Canada. But this legislation presented by this government lands so far from what is needed, so far from the reality of the problem that it seeks to address, that it's really difficult to see a common sense solution here. And this is the kind of stuff we continuously get from the Liberals. We see this on their approach to the environment, on immigration, on the economy, on guns, drugs, and the list goes on. And now there's a common series of steps that they go through when they encounter these various problems. And first, they deny that there's a problem. And then once that stops working for them, then they start to blame the Conservatives. And then they start blaming Canadians. And then finally, when they run out of people to blame, once the PM's wizards and the PMO finally recognize that something needs to be done before even the CBC starts dumping on them, well, then they put something like this forward. But it takes all of those things to happen before this Liberal government actually takes steps to address real issues. So, and when they do finally present something, it's unremarkable, as you'll see later in my speech here. So for years, the communist dictatorship of Beijing has been taking advantage of Canadians, of our weak acquisition laws at Canadian industry and our proprietary technology. And why is that? Well, part of it seems to be the bizarre fascination that this Prime Minister has with China. We all remember his comment about admiring admiring Beijing's basic dictatorship. Though at the time, few thought that he was actually naive enough to believe that and to throw open the doors to Beijing. It turns out that he actually has that fascination. So when the former Environment Minister visited China in 2018, she too gushed over China's leadership on climate change and its ability to do this on a scale like no other country. In her address to Boston's Northeastern University this past May, the Deputy Prime Minister stated the fundamental question of our time is, does capitalist democracy still work? Well, I think it would be better if the minister were here working for Canadians, but that is what she actually said, and I'll quote it. That is the question being posed around kitchen tables in my country, and this one, as parents, wonder if our children can count on capitalist democracy's essential promise of a future more prosperous than our present. These comments, of course, raise the specter of what she considers a viable alternative. China's basic dictatorship, perhaps? To read between the lines, her thought process seems to be Canada's current economic woes are not the result of her government's incompetent management, but rather the fault of capitalism and democracy. As one journalist recently noted, if we're talking about what passes for capitalism and democracy in Justin Trudeau's Canada, not unlike those of Canada, where capitalism has come to be characterized by a close...
Order, the Honourable Government Deputy House Leader.
Madam Speaker, this is sometimes what happens when you're just reading speeches that are given to you, and that are written by staffers who perhaps don't know the rules of the House. But he just said the Prime Minister's name. He just said the Prime Minister's name in the context of this being Prime Minister's name, Canada. Perhaps the member should inform those who are writing his speeches how the rules of the House work so that this doesn't happen again.
Well, I just want to remind the member that I'm sure the honourable member can't prove for sure who's written the speech, and I would just say to be careful on what is being said in the House here. The honourable member mentioned the Prime Minister's name. I would just ask the honourable member to please be careful to ensure that he is not mentioning an individual's name that is a parliamentarian that sits in the House. I know that that does slip from time to time. I think that it's done on both sides of the House, and I would ask members to please be careful. I do have another point of order, I would assume, on the Honourable for Calgary Centre.
Yes, Madam Speaker, and I would ask that you ask the member from Kingston Islands to withdraw his comment there, because I know it's practice on one side of the House to do that, just read canned speeches. I know this member, and I know he wrote that speech. I know he writes all his speeches like most of my members do. So I'd ask you to kindly ask him to withdraw that comment, which is meant to put down one of my colleagues here on this side of the House, please.
Again, I have basically indicated that, honourable members should be careful on what they put in their speech, and they should be careful on whether they say somebody has done something or not done something. I'm not sure if the honourable Government Deputy House Leader would like to rise to apologize on that. He's not willing to do that. So again, I would just ask members to please be careful. I mean, it causes disorder in the House, which is not the way that we want to function here. The Honourable Member Provencher.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. And to carry on here, a so-called capitalist system where the Prime Minister picks the winners and the losers and stacks the deck to ensure a select few friends get rich while everyone else is pushed to become reliant on government for everything from housing to basic income. The general trend, and I believe, is the end game of this government, and inevitably it's going to collapse. Likewise, so would a democracy that has been left unprotected and been consistently undermined by the actions of this Prime Minister and his friends in Beijing. Beijing had spies, scientists with ties to China's bioweapons program in our National Microbiology Lab in Winnipeg, one of our most secure facilities. Now, they're nowhere to be found. And this Prime Minister actually took the Speaker of his House, the person that sits in your chair, Madam Speaker, took that person to court, sued that person to prevent the truth from coming out about what was happening at the Winnipeg Microbiology Lab with those Chinese spies. hacking and espionage against Canadian infrastructure, academia, and industry. The list goes on and on. It's always China. And what have they done so far? In 8 years, what has this government done? In 8 years, they've done nothing up until today. Well, unless, of course, you include cash for access with Chinese billionaires and donations to the Trudeau Foundation, the answer would be nothing. But now they have a plan, Bill C-34. And so what's the solution this government puts forward? Are they banning communist Chinese acquisitions of Canadian companies? Are they taking China to the World Trade Organization? Are they expelling Beijing-run spies and state police from Canada? Nope. No, their solution is more government, more bureaucracy, specifically for more power to be concentrated with the minister, and not with the Minister of Public Safety or the Minister of Defense, but with the Minister of Innovation, Science, and Industry. It's bizarre, Madam Speaker. You can't make this stuff up. But in almost every case with this government, it's the same minister that they task with fixing a problem that created the problem.
Exactly. Yep.
And in this case, we have the Minister of Industry, who, by the way, I actually like, and I wish him all the best in his leadership bid. And, but you know, in 2017, before his time, the Minister of Industry failed to request a full national security review of the acquisition of BC-based Norsat International and its subsidiary Sinclair Technologies by Hytera Communications, which is owned, and wait for it, the People's Republic of China.
Oh.
Then, in December of 2022, under the former Public Safety Minister, the RCMP awarded a contract to supply sensitive hardware for their communication systems to Sinclair Technologies, now owned by a Beijing and major supporter to China's Public Security Ministry. Well, then it was revealed also in December of 2022 that since 2017, the CBSA has also been using communications equipment and technology from Hytera Communications. Hytera has been charged with 21 counts of espionage in the United States and has been banned by President Biden from doing business in the U.S., but not here in Canada, not under this Liberal government, Madam Speaker. How did this minister respond to these acquisitions? Cool. Well, let's look at another example. In March 2021, the minister updated and enhanced guidelines for national security reviews for transactions involving critical minerals and state-owned enterprises. But in January 2022, he failed to follow his own guidelines when he fast-tracked the takeover of Canadian lithium company, Neo Lithium Corp, by once again Chinese state-owned Zijin Mining, without a national security review taking place. Then in November of 2022, the minister ordered 3 Chinese companies to divest their ownership of 3 critical mineral firms. But guess who he forgot to mention? Neo Lithium. And the list goes on. So I'm not sure what's more astounding. The facts that it's always China with this government, or that this minister can put forward this legislation with a straight face. How can he expect this House or Canadians to trust him to solve this problem when his own lack of oversight has been so instrumental in creating the problem? Now, as I wrap up, the member from Kingston and the Islands always asks, is there nothing positive in the legislation? Can't you say one thing positive? See, even he needs reassurance, Madam Speaker, that they aren't completely dropping the ball. And so I'm happy to inform him and his
Time is up.